A poor ER nurse walked into the wrong hospital boardroom, sat down at the wrong chair, and accidentally read a billionaire's most confidential document out loud. And somehow that was the moment Lucas Hale's entire carefully controlled world began to fall apart. The hospital was never quiet, but the third floor was a different kind of chaos. Sophia Bennett had been on her feet for 11 hours straight when the elevator doors opened on what she thought was the break room level. She stepped out, still reading the medication chart in her hands, still half thinking about the patient in bed 7 who hadn't spoken in 2 days, and walked straight through the first open door she saw. The room was cool, quiet. She sat down in the nearest chair and exhaled for the first time all shift. Then she looked up. 12 people in expensive suits stared back at her. A projector screen displayed a spreadsheet with more zeros than she'd ever seen in her life. And at the head of the table, arms crossed, gray eyes sharp as a scalpel, sat a man she recognized from the hospital lobby portrait. Lucas Hale, founder and CEO of Hale Pharma, the man who had donated 3 new wings to this hospital and whose name was carved in stone above the entrance. Sophia looked at the chart in her hands. She looked at the room. She looked at Lucas Hale. "Wrong floor," she said. No one laughed. She stood up, and in the exact moment she pushed back her chair, the wind from the door she'd left open sent a stack of papers sliding off the table. She grabbed for them instinctively, the way you do when you've spent years catching things before they hit the floor. IV bags, trays, people, and she managed to catch most of them. But not before reading, out loud and clearly, the heading on the top page. Projected discontinuation of Veritab Generics, Q4 timeline. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. She set the papers down. She looked at Lucas Hale one more time. And then she walked out. She made it exactly 14 steps down the hallway before she heard the door open behind her. "Excuse me." His voice was the kind that didn't need to be raised to fill a corridor. Sophia kept walking. "Nurse." A pause. "I'm talking to you." She stopped. Not because of the tone. She'd handled worse from attending physicians at 2 in the morning. But because she was exhausted, and she was already going to be late for her next round, and she did not have the energy to pretend this was anything other than what it was. She turned around. Lucas Hale was taller than his portrait suggested. He'd left his jacket on the chair inside and stood in the hallway in a white dress shirt, sleeves already rolled to the elbow, looking at her like she was a variable he hadn't accounted for. "I need your name," he said. "Sophia Bennett. 3rd floor nursing staff. I got off the wrong elevator. I'm sorry for the interruption." She turned to go. "You read a confidential document." "I read a heading. I don't know what Veritab Generics are." She did, actually. She knew exactly what they were. But that was a conversation she was not going to have in this hallway. "You can check the security footage. I walked in, I sat down, I picked up some papers, I left. I didn't photograph anything. I'm not worried about photographs." He studied her with that same flat, assessing expression. "I'm worried about what you understood." Sophia met his gaze. "Nothing, that's my business." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My legal team will want to speak with you." "About what?" "I work here. I walked into the wrong room. If that's a crime, you're going to have a very long list of defendants." She glanced toward the elevator. "Can I go?" "I have patience." For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not softness, more like recalibration. "Go," he said. She went. She thought that was the end of it. She thought wrong. 3 days later, Sophia was eating a sandwich in the break room when her supervisor knocked and told her there was someone in the lobby asking for her. Not a patient family member. Not a vendor. He said it with the careful expression of a man who had been quietly intimidated and was trying not to show it. Lucas Hale was standing near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking at the portrait of himself on the wall with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Visiting yourself?" she asked. He turned. "I need to speak with you. You have a legal team for that. I told them to stand down." He looked at her steadily. "My grandmother is a patient here. She was admitted yesterday. She's been asking for a private nurse, someone to stay with her through the day, manage her medications, help her with physical therapy compliance. She doesn't respond well to strangers. A beat. She apparently met you last month when she was in for her cardiology consult. She remembers your name." Sophia thought back. A sharp-eyed woman in her mid-70s, white hair, the kind of posture that suggested she'd once been told to sit up straight and had simply never stopped. She'd complained about the pillow angle for 20 minutes and then told Sophia she had good hands. Mrs. Aldridge, Sophia said. Eleanor Hale Aldridge, my grandmother. Something passed across his face, brief and controlled. She's 78. She had a fall. There's a hip replacement scheduled for next week, and the recovery will be long. He paused. She's agreed to inpatient rehab only if you're the one overseeing her care. Sophia crossed her arms. I have a full patient load. I spoke with the department head. The staffing adjustment has already been arranged. You'd be compensated additionally for the private care hours. He said it the way people say things when they're used to the word yes, arriving quickly after money is mentioned. And in exchange, Sophia said, you forget I was in that room. In exchange, he said, I don't pursue what could technically be classified as a breach of confidentiality, and my grandmother gets the nurse she asked for. He tilted his head slightly. It's not a threat. It's a practical arrangement. She looked at him for a long moment. 2 weeks, she said. My regular patients stay on my roster. I add your grandmother's care on top, and I decide how her care is managed. Not you, not your legal team. Agreed? And you stop looking at me like I'm a liability. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. I'll try. That was how Sophia Bennett ended up spending 12 days in the private recovery suite of a woman who called her dear and asked her opinion on everything and watched her with eyes that seemed to know things nobody had said out loud. Eleanor Hale Aldridge was not an easy patient. She was specific, demanding, and absolutely unwilling to do her physical therapy unless she found a good reason. Sophia gave her reasons. She sat on the edge of the bed in the mornings and told her about the patients she'd seen recover, not the easy ones, the hard ones, and Eleanor listened and then did her exercises with her jaw set and her eyes forward. Lucas came every day at 5 o'clock. He sat in the chair near the window and talked to his grandmother, and sometimes Sophia was in the room and sometimes she wasn't. When she was, he spoke to her directly, which she hadn't expected. He asked whether Eleanor was sleeping, whether she was eating, whether the pain management protocol was working. He asked like someone who had read every page of the medical chart and still wanted to hear it from a person, not a document. One evening, Eleanor fell asleep mid-conversation, and Lucas and Sophia ended up standing in the hallway without quite meaning to. She told me you sat with her through a thunderstorm last Tuesday, he said. She doesn't like thunder. She wasn't going to sleep, so I stayed. He was quiet for a moment. That wasn't in your job description. Most of the things I do aren't in the job description. He looked at her. It wasn't the flat assessment from the boardroom. It was something more uncertain, like he was trying to place her and kept coming up with the wrong answer. Why nursing? He asked. Why pharma? She said back. He actually smiled that time. Small and brief, but real. My father. He built the company. I inherited both it and the expectation. And is that what you wanted? A pause. I thought so. He glanced toward the window. For a long time I was very certain about what I wanted. And now, he looked at her. Less certain. She didn't know what to do with that, so she said goodnight and went back to check on Eleanor. The problem, the real problem, started on the 8th day. Sophia's younger brother, Thomas, called at 7 in the morning. She knew from his voice before he finished the first sentence. He was at a clinic in Portland. The test results had come back. His kidneys, which had been a low-level concern for 3 years, were not a low-level concern anymore. The doctor was using words like dialysis, like transplant consideration, like immediate treatment plan. Thomas was 24 and he was trying very hard to sound calm and not succeeding. Sophia sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes after the call. She did the math she'd been doing in the back of her mind for 3 years, the math that she'd been careful not to think about too directly because the number at the end of it never changed. The treatment was expensive. The kind of expensive that didn't respond to payment plans. She went upstairs. She checked on Eleanor. She did her job. Lucas noticed at 4 o'clock. He didn't say anything in front of his grandmother. He waited until Eleanor had dozed off and then he stepped into the hallway and said simply, "What happened? I'm fine. You've checked Eleanor's chart 4 times in the last 2 hours. You check it twice on a normal day." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her. "You don't have to tell me. But something is wrong." She told him about Thomas. She didn't mean to. She'd meant to say something short and dismissive and walk back into the room. But she was tired, and the number from that morning was still sitting behind her sternum like a stone. And it came out. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer anything. When she finished, he said, I'll cover the treatment costs. She looked at him. Excuse me? Your brother needs care. I can cover it. No conditions. There are always conditions, not this time. She shook her head. I'm not your charity project, Mr. Hale. I know that. And I'm not going to owe you something I can't repay. You wouldn't owe me anything. He said it quietly, seriously, without the efficient boardroom certainty. I'm offering because I want to help. That's all. That's not all. You barely know me. People don't just offer to pay for. My company pulled Veritab Generics from production 4 years ago, he said. She went very still. He kept his eyes on her. The drug your father needed, after his diagnosis. When the only version left on the market was the branded one, 3 times the price. He paused. I found out 2 months ago, during an internal audit. I didn't know when we made the decision. I let a team handle the portfolio review and I didn't ask enough questions, but I know now. He didn't look away. I can't give you those years back, but I can make sure Thomas has what he needs. Sophia stared at him. The hallway was very quiet. You knew, she said, when you said your legal team would want to speak with me. You already knew. No, I didn't connect it until after Eleanor told me your last name. I looked into it. He exhaled slowly. I'm not asking you to forgive the company, or me. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, and because I'm not willing to stand in front of you and pretend I don't. She didn't know what to feel. There was anger, clean and clear, and underneath it something more complicated that she couldn't name yet. I need to go, she said. Sophia, I need to go. She walked toward the elevator. She pressed the button. She stood there and waited because she wasn't going to take the stairs like she was running from something, even though she was. She didn't come back the next day. She called in sick, which she hadn't done in 2 years. She sat in her apartment with Thomas on FaceTime and didn't tell him any of it. She listened to him talk about the treatment options the clinic had outlined and said the right things, and after she hung up, she stared at the ceiling for a long time. On the second day, a courier arrived at her door. The envelope was from Hale Pharma's legal department. Inside was a letter, and behind it, a single sheet of paper, a research summary. A proposal for reinstating Veritab Generics, already drafted, with a distribution plan that included partnered hospitals and a subsidized pricing structure for low-income patients. There was a handwritten note on the back of the letter, not company stationery. His handwriting, smaller and less controlled than she would have expected. I should have asked more questions 4 years ago. I'm asking them now. This doesn't fix anything. But it's a start if you'll let it be. Sophia sat with it for a long time. Then she got up, changed out of the clothes she'd been wearing for 2 days, and drove back to the hospital. Eleanor was awake when she walked in. The older woman looked at her with those sharp, knowing eyes and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "You look like you've been fighting with yourself." "I have," Sophia said. "Who won?" Sophia pulled up the chair. "I'm still deciding." Eleanor reached over and patted her hand once. "He's not his father, you know. He made mistakes because he trusted the wrong people to care about the right things. That's a different kind of failure." She paused. "I'm not asking you to let him off the hook. I'm asking you to be careful about what you decide he is." Sophia looked at her. "Does he know you say things like this?" "He knows I say everything. He just doesn't always hear it." Eleanor settled back against the pillow. "Now are you going to take my blood pressure, or are we going to talk about my grandson all afternoon?" "Both," Sophia said, and picked up the cuff. Lucas arrived at 5 o'clock, same as always. He stopped when he saw her. Something crossed his face, relief and wariness in the same breath, which she understood because she felt it too. She waited until Eleanor was distracted by the evening news, then stepped into the hallway. He followed. "The proposal," she said. "Reinstating the generics. Is that actually happening, or is it a gesture?" "It's happening," he said. "I've already pulled it from the R&D freeze. It'll take 6 months to get back to market, but it's moving." She nodded. "Thomas is starting dialysis next week. I'm going to accept the help." She said it carefully, like she was still deciding the shape of the words. "Not because you owe me, because he needs it, and I'm not going to let pride cost him his health." "Understood. But I need you to know that I'm not going to pretend the other thing didn't happen. I don't want you to." She looked at him. In the fluorescent light of the hospital hallway, in his shirt sleeves with dark circles under his eyes, he looked less like a CEO and more like a person. The kind who'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally put it down somewhere he wasn't sure was the right place. "Okay," she said. He exhaled. okay. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet. It was more like the door left open a crack, not an invitation, not a refusal, just space. The weeks that followed were different. Thomas started his treatment. Sophia drove to Portland on her days off and sat with him through the long dialysis sessions. And he complained about the chairs, and she brought him the good snacks, and they talked the way they hadn't talked in years, really talked, without the low hum of financial dread underneath everything. Lucas texted her once to ask how Thomas was doing. She answered. He texted again 2 days later about something Eleanor had said that had made him laugh. She answered that too. It was small and strange, and she didn't examine it too closely. Eleanor was discharged on a Tuesday. She hugged Sophia at the elevator in a way that managed to be both brief and fierce, which seemed exactly right for who she was. "Come for dinner," Eleanor told her. "Third Sunday of the month. I cook." Lucas sits there pretending he's not impressed. She pointed one finger. "Don't argue." Sophia didn't argue. She went to dinner. She sat across from Lucas and beside Eleanor and ate pot roast and listened to Eleanor tell a story about a business trip Lucas had taken at 22, where everything had gone spectacularly wrong. Lucas protested every detail with a specificity that suggested the story was completely accurate. Sophia laughed more than she had in months. Walking to her car afterward, Lucas walked beside her. The night was cool and the neighborhood was quiet, and she felt strangely calm. "She does this, you know," he said. "Invites people to dinner and then disappears into the kitchen so they have to talk to each other." "I know," Sophia said. "She told me her plan last week." He stopped. She stopped. He looked at her with something in his expression that was unguarded in a way she'd never seen from him before. Uncertain, open, slightly afraid. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I'm not good at." He stopped. Started again. "I've spent a long time being very certain and not asking enough questions. I don't want to do that with you." She looked at him. "So ask questions. Can I call you?" "Not about Eleanor. Not about work." She thought about the boardroom and the hallway and Thomas's face on the phone that morning in the parking garage and the handwritten note and the pot roast and all the small moments that had somehow added up to this exact sidewalk. "Yes," she said. "He called," she answered. And then he called again, and she called first. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the space between them stopped being cautious and started being something she didn't have a careful name for, something that felt, for the first time in a long time, like something she'd been moving toward without knowing. Thomas's kidney function improved enough over the following months that the transplant discussion moved from urgent to monitored. He called Sophia on a Tuesday to tell her, and she sat down on the kitchen floor and cried with relief, which she told no one except Lucas, who said nothing but drove 40 minutes to bring her coffee and stayed until the shaking stopped. She thought about that afterward. About how there are things people do that don't have a formal name, not grand gestures, not declarations, just presence at the right moment, consistent and quiet and real. She thought about her father, and the drug that hadn't been there when he needed it, and the man who hadn't asked enough questions, and the difference between complicity and failure and what it meant to try to repair something that couldn't be fully repaired. She thought about how forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting, and how it also wasn't the same as staying angry at something that was already trying to change. Hale Pharma's reinstated generics reached market 6 months later. At the launch event, Lucas gave a short speech about access and accountability and the questions a company had to keep asking itself. Sophia stood near the back of the room. He found her eyes in the crowd once, briefly, and something passed between them that didn't need words. On the way out, a reporter stopped him for a comment. He answered, and then without looking back reached for her hand. She let him take it. Afterward, standing on the steps outside, he said, "My grandmother is going to say she planned all of this. She did plan all of this. I know." He looked at her. "I'm not complaining." The night was clear and the city hummed around them, and Sophia thought about a girl who had stepped off the wrong elevator and walked into the wrong room and accidentally read the wrong document out loud, and how every single wrong turn had led her here, to this man, to this moment, to the exact right place she hadn't known she was looking for. She didn't say any of that. She just tightened her hand around his, and they walked.